Good morning, everyone. I am so happy to have this webinar today. We're going to have myself and Brian, who you probably see in the lower right-hand corner here. I am working remotely because I've got this nasty cold, but let me just turn on. I didn't want to mess up your webinar by canceling it because I know that this is such powerful content. Brian from Microsoft Retail Stores is going to go into in detail into the flows that he used and the service automation that he used in order to build the server patching app that we discussed in the last webinar. So Brian, if you don't mind, since you have a much better voice, I'm going to have you introduce and then kick off the webinar for us, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Blanchard, and I work in Microsoft Retail. And what you're going to see today is part 2 of the patching app that we wrote to manage our patching infrastructure here at Microsoft for the retail stores. I'm going to go into Flows and Azure Automation and see how the automation works with this application. What I'm going to do now here is go ahead and share my screen and get started. All right. So if you caught the last video, what you're seeing here is our patch dashboard. And you're seeing the total number of servers, compliant, non-compliant, and percentage of compliant servers. And I'm going to breeze through this a little bit so we can move on to the flows, but I just want to catch people up that missed the last one. Each of our servers are split into buckets or groups that we categorize, and they patch all at the same time. And I'm going to show you the servers interface here where you can get a list of all the servers. And on this interface, we can actually add new servers. Click the plus button here. We can add new servers here, and they will populate our backend. Our backend is stored on Azure Table Storage, and we're using an Azure function to populate and retrieve the data with a custom connector. You also have the ability here to drill into the non-compliant machines so you can take a better look. And all the metadata that goes around the servers are in the Azure Table Storage. You can see the versions, the last updates, who they belong to, and things of that nature. The last piece of this app here are the server groups. So we can actually take a cursory view of what's in each one of these groups and move them around and put them in the right places if we need to. All right, the flows I'm going to show you today are about patching, scheduling, and populating the data inside of our Azure Table Storage. I'm going to take you through the flows here of the patch. When we initiate a patch, we can initiate a patch for a single server or a set of servers, as well as we can set a schedule for when they should trigger. That initiation will happen via PowerApps, which will in turn call a Microsoft Flow that has a connection to our Azure Automation hybrid worker. That's the thing that does the most of the work. It will go out there and patch the machines. It will also update our table storage to let us know the status of that, whether it was successful or failed or things of that nature. So the first thing we're going to do here is I'm going to show you how I populate my database or my table storage. I have a spreadsheet that lives in my OneDrive that has all the servers and the metadata about the servers. Just your basic spreadsheet with a table in it. I'm going to go to Flows. And I have the populate servers from OneDrive flow. I'm going to go ahead and start it, and then we're going to look into how it works. And before I start that, I want you to see that we're at 40% compliant, 22 servers. These numbers should change after this flow runs. Take a look at the flow activity. So what I have here is a manual trigger of the flow. I get the rows from my spreadsheet. I have a security code in here, and this is what I use to call the Azure function that populates the data. And then I have a for each that loops through each one of these rows and runs this code. And it's not showing the code here. So here's the metadata. I'll go into edit the flow so you can see the code. what it's doing is just doing a put method using the HTTP activity, calls my API, and inserts the data from the previous activity down to the JSON here, the JSON object. And what this will do is go ahead and insert or update all the records in my table storage.
So, Brian, quick question. So this particular flow, its trigger is there has been a change request on the Azure table as far as the metadata goes, and then it's triggered by that change, and then it goes and gets all that data.
It can, but really the reason I use this flow was actually the initial population of my table storage. So let's say we're going to provision 20 more servers or 30 servers. I'll go ahead and update that spreadsheet and kick off this flow. And the reason I do that is so I don't have to come in here and click the add button 30 times, because that takes a little bit of time and work to do. Gotcha. So I use the flow to populate it. Now it only knows what's in my spreadsheet. It doesn't know about it being patched. It just knows what I tell it right away.
Gotcha.
So just a little time saver, so you don't really have to do all this typing. Actually, okay. But the nice thing is it's just a couple of pieces of the flow to do a put that calls that API and does the inserts for me. I'll go ahead and refresh. These numbers should change if it worked correctly. And yep, now we're 9.1% compliant. We have all of our machines. Now the next flow I want to talk about is our patch now flow. This one will patch all the servers in the individual groups that I select. So I'm going to go ahead and trigger it and then take you into the flow and show you the pieces, because it takes a little bit to run. It's about a couple minutes.
Okay.
We get a nice pop-up here that tells us, that confirms the user if they really want to do this patching or not. Yes, I want to patch everything in AD East. I'll click yes. And this is initiate patch group. So run history, 12 seconds ago. Okay, great. I'm going to show you the output of the flow, then I'll show you how the flow works. I initiate through PowerApps. I capture the server group that was being passed to it. I capture the patch version. So I'm going to go back here so I can explain this a little bit more in detail. That server group is at AD East, so I'm passing this data to my flow. And then the patch number, I'm saying, hey, this is the patch version that I want it to be. So I capture both of those. This is a connector that connects to my Azure table storage. And the reason I'm doing it, this is that custom connector we created in the last webinar. And the reason I'm doing I'm doing that because I don't know the server names I want to patch. So I'm passing that server group. It's going to make a call to the data source and just return those servers that are in that server group. And I have a filter array, and I check the patch level too, because what I don't want to do is patch servers that are already patched. But if you take a look here, what we get out of the box is, this is the Azure Automation piece. And what we're getting out of the box here, it applies to each of these servers. So if we scroll down a little bit, we see server name 6. That's after it did the data pull from the Azure table storage and the function. And we're doing a little loading.
Brian, just FYI, that's one of my favorite features of Flow that apply to each. And I love the way it counts at the top, how many it's done. You see that you can kind of flip through them to look at the data. It's like my favorite thing in Flow.
I love that too. And I didn't have to do this apply to each. What I did when I created this, I just connected my servers not at current patch level to the Azure Automation piece, and it created the apply to each for me.
Awesome. Oh, that's even better.
Yeah. And what's great, it's giving me the ability to run parallel servers, so servers at the same time, and running the jobs individually. And I really like the next failed. Luckily, I haven't had a failed yet, but they show that in line as well. And so here you're seeing a different server name, and it's calling my Azure Automation job. I'll go into the flow a little bit so you can see the Azure Automation piece, and then we'll jump over to the job itself.
Okay.
All right, so I'm just going to show you this.
You guys pop your questions if you have them. I'm watching the questions in the chat.
I'm not quite sure what this is here, but when I added the Azure Automation job here, it just asked me my subscription, my resource group, my automation account, the runbook name, and the wait for job. If you have parameters in here, it will ask for your parameters as well, which you're not seeing right now, unfortunately. But so if you have parameters in your Azure Automation job, you can fill them out here and grab that data from any of the previous activities in the flow. So it's very flexible. And now what I'm going to do, since it's already ran, I'm going to go ahead and flip over to Azure Automation. I'm going to refresh. Last time I refreshed this was 318. Let's see. Cool. So what we're seeing here is the job output, the job I just kicked off. And when I kicked off that server group, there were 3 servers in there that it should have patched. I look at my job output, and yep, I see 1, 2, 3 servers. So it ran and patched each of those servers at the same time and patched them separately. So we don't have to worry about it. If one fails, it's okay. The other 2 are still going to go. The Azure Automation piece is really nice because it queues up the jobs. So you can just shove as many things as you want into it, and it'll just work on them.
Yeah, it's awesome. So it keeps them in like a line, and if it skips one, does it go back to the one it skipped? You know, for instance, if it fails, does it try again?
I don't have retry logic in my code. It'll just show an error in here, and then bug. So I'm going to drill in here. We're not going to see an error, but I'll drill into one of the outputs. And I didn't put a lot of output in my code. I apologize for that.
Oh no, that's okay. I think simple is best, right?
Yeah. So what you can see here is the input, the output, the logs, the errors, and I don't have any errors or warning, but we'll go and take a look at that input, and this will tell me what server name it actually worked on. So it was patching server name 6. That's what the flow called. Now remember, the flow called 3 different servers. So I'm going to go back to the jobs, and we should see a different server name in this input. And this is just simple JSON we're passing. And yep, indeed, that was server name 8. So that's kind of nice. So you can send a bunch of servers to it and then debug individually. One failure is not going to cause your entire group to fail, which has been very beneficial to us because, you know, sometimes servers are offline or doesn't like to apply the patches, or maybe I have a code bug.
And you could theoretically have Flow send a push notification when something has failed, like if we use the error trapping on Flow.
Yes, that's an excellent idea. Yeah. Absolutely, do the push notification, or we can do email notifications, or a bunch of other things. Since we're in Azure here, we can also use the event grid and all kinds of different things to let us know that errors have happened.
Okay, perfect.
It really just depends on how we want to do this. Where I wanted to show you the code behind this patching, but I'm not seeing it here. So I'm going to come back out here and go back to my Azure Automation account. I want you to see the job and see how easy it is. Okay, Runbooks. Patch server. Okay, in edit. We're going to look at the view code. Okay, so here's the code that is actually doing the work. What you're going to see up here is the parameter, and this is where I pass the server name. This is that Azure function that we created to insert an automation variable that you store in Azure, so it's not displayed on the screen here, which gives you a little bit of security. I just put it together and I grab a date. This is the data that I'm going to be passing in a JSON string to the API. And this is where, now, unfortunately, in this demo, I couldn't really patch a server. It could take up to 30 minutes, and I didn't really want to spend a lot of time showing that.
No, makes sense. Yeah.
Right here under line 26, this is where you would put your code to do whatever it is you want to do. Maybe you want to patch a server. Maybe you want to reboot a server. Maybe, I mean, you maybe just want to query data from it. So you can do anything here. So it's more of a boilerplate code to do the work that you need to do. And then once I'm done, I just go ahead and invoke a REST method, which calls my API and passes that data. So I've kind of hard-coded the success in here in the patch version to make easy to debug.
So yeah, it makes sense.
Azure Automation is a very, very nice tool for automation. And it can be connected to via a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Go back to my Power App here. Let's see if these numbers change. So we know we got our successes. Oh, excellent. So that's great. That actually worked. I also have another flow here, which is going to be very similar. I'm going to drill into one of these non-compliant machines. And I got a patch now. So just in case you wanted to do single servers and not a group, because there are times when we have groups where we have to run at night, but some of the servers we know are okay to hit during the day because they failed or whatever. So we can do the patch now. And it's going to be a very similar scenario here. I'll hit yes. I come into my flows, close that. And you'll see I have a initiate patch single server flow. Now these could be one flow and just flip between them. I just wanted to keep them separate and not put the branching logic in there to lower confusion while I'm displaying this. But you could absolutely wrap these up into one flow and just call it. And have a condition inside your flow that tells you which way to go and what to do. And now you notice in this one, this flow is a little different where I didn't need to query my data source to figure out the server names because I'm passing the individual server name. And still the same thing here. We're just calling the runbook to do the work. Take a look. Our flow was successful. We'll go see if our job was successful. And yep, 1016, that's great. So that's working. I'll go here. Should have one more compliant. Yep, okay, now we're down to 2. Okay, so both of those flows work great. The last one is a scheduling feature, because sometimes you want to kick off or schedule your servers in the middle of the night, and you don't want to be around here to push that patch now button. And this one I really enjoy here. I'm going to click the schedule button. And the pop-up that's going to look a little bit different. It's going to say, okay, schedule these guys for today. I'm going to go ahead and put a time in here. And there's several ways you can do the time. 10. We'll go with 10:20 to give it some time. Yes. I'll come back to our flows. There's my schedule flow. That's great. We see that it says it's running. What's really cool about that is PowerApps initiated the flow, but I have a scheduling in here that says it's a or wait until that time comes into play. So there's that timestamp that got passed, and in about a minute, this thing is going to go ahead and kick off and do the rest of the things that we've seen it do before in the other flows.
Exactly, because it's waiting for that time, right? And then using the schedule trigger called schedule.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I didn't even notice that. I saw it counting down there too. That was kind of cool. But what I was really excited about that, or it's counting up, was I've used a schedule before, but I've used a schedule to kick off at certain times. I've never had a wait kind of schedule in there. And I was really excited to see that Flow had this built into the system. It was a very nice way to handle it.
Awesome. Yeah.
Right out of the box. I was like, that's great.
Yeah.
So that should kick off pretty soon. And we're just going to see pretty much the same thing you saw with this. 3 of these jobs will populate and the patching would essentially happen, or whatever activity you want to do on the box.
Kind of like when we used to set up timer jobs on SharePoint, kind of only way easier.
Yeah, it was really nice. It was a little tricky with the time zone. You have to change it to UTC inside of your Power Apps, but I found an easy command for that. And if you look at this here, this is triggered, it's run. That's wonderful. 3 of them went. Very happy to see that. And we'll take a look here. See how you're doing. Oh, we got 1 queued. That's cool. And 2 completed. Yeah, so what's great about the Azure Automation piece is that queuing, it'll just sit there and hold it till it's ready to go. So you're not going to beat on Azure too much. It can handle as much as you can throw at it. Let that go. In the meantime, we'll do a little refresh here. Great. 2 compliant, 1 non-compliant.
I'm just amazed in the way you've layered this solution and you've taken advantage of all the power user tools. I mean, everything so far seems within reach of a power user as far as replication. And it made your application so much richer to take advantage of Azure, to take advantage of Azure functions, to take advantage of the automation as well as flow in your Power App. Just extended the value so much.
Oh yes, and what I really like about it, it's still a low-code situation.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of this code you can for the Azure Automation, you can just grab off the web. It's all there. They have different things, so it was like okay, and then it all just works together. A lot of point, click, and go.
I love it. Yeah.
You know, it made it so much easier. And calling the Azure functions really easy. It's great. I guess we'll just let this queue. It'll finish eventually.
Take a look at the last webinar, guys. If you didn't see the last one by Brian, where we actually look into the Power App and how the Power App was built, but we also talk about the Azure functions and how we use that to get and to change the server metadata. So it's really interesting. Don't miss out on watching that webinar. It's recorded. You can see it on the same channel.
But yeah, that's pretty much the app there and how we handle this stuff.
Will you plan to go into the flows and let us see them and how you build them?
Sure, we could do it. Why not? We have some time here. Is there a flow in particular you want me to build?
So the one that was, so you had a set that you could have put together, but you separated. Mm-hmm. Can we look at those two together? Because I think those are the ones that actually schedule the patch.
Sure. Okay, so we have the initiate patch single server and the initiate patch group. Would you like me just to start over and create a new one, or?
No, I think if you edit the one you have and kind of just let's look at it in edit mode, that might help.
All right.
And I'll be watching for questions. No questions yet.
All right, so we're in the edit mode of the initiate patch group. You just add an activity for the PowerApps button. I added a variable for the server group. I just named it server group. And then I'm pulling this data from what I'm asking in PowerApps.
Okay.
And the same thing here for the patch version. I'm just asking whatever that is in PowerApps. And what that needs to do is, let me get into edit mode here. I'll show you how that works.
And this is one of the things that PowerApps kind of helps with this flow, in that when you create a button in PowerApps and you attach a flow action to it, it already inserts that PowerApps as the first step. And then anything you click ask in PowerApps creates a parameter in PowerApps that you can fill in later. So it's your way of building your own function, so to speak, in PowerApps, using the integration of flow in PowerApps.
Exactly.
It's our circle of hope spinning.
Yes, it is. like nice.
We're working on making it faster.
It's all right. All right, I'm gonna hit the patch now here. I'm gonna stop the app. So in the yes button here, there we go. So this is that initiate patch group. They just give the run method when you go ahead and go to, I think it's action or view and add a flow. And I'm passing the name of the group here. So this is my label. And I'm also passing the patch version that's on the screen as well. And that's really all there is to trigger this. The rest of this is.
Can I point out something, Brian? Yeah. So if you notice, everyone above where he's clicking is the syntax in gray, in the gray bar above the formula. that syntax is created every time you click Ask in PowerApps. And so as you are entering the formula, it's actually guiding you as to what it's looking for. And you can have those parameters in a text field, in a gallery, it doesn't matter where it is. You would just alert it to where to get that stuff from. He's using text controls. And then fill that information in, and then Flow will be able to use it in the processing of the flow. Now, what's important is you'll get error messages if you don't enter all the parameters. And here's one more tip I want to give you. When you're using Flow, you may need to use the same parameter more than once. You don't have to keep clicking Ask in PowerApps. You can go and refer to that function in your dynamic fields in Flow, so that you don't have to create Ask in PowerApp parameters when you already have that parameter asked for. So I hope that makes sense. But this integration is really awesome because it enables you to create your own functions in PowerApps that Flow can use to process the business scenario. Thank you for letting me interrupt, Brian.
Oh, great. I also want to add another tip. When you're seeing this data here in PowerApps, how you see it say server group value and patch version, when you're creating your flow, it's important to name these. So it's a real good idea to go in here and rename this, because out of the box, it just says variable. And if you rename this, it's going to look better inside of your gray area up here, instead of saying variable 1 and variable 2, which could be confusing at times.
Yes, and I think that's a best practice. Those of you that use Flow, even if you use it independently of PowerApps, to make your flows more readable, rename your actions and your triggers.
Yes, definitely something I had to learn. So we have where we're passing the data, and this is our custom connector. I want to show you this real quick. If we come into here, get out of the way, let's go to View, Data Sources. Maybe. So you see our custom connector here, our patch connector, and that's how we connect to our table storage in our Azure function to see the data in our application. Well, the great thing is it was build once and used twice. We built this in the last webinar, and I was able to reference it in this one. So I'm going to go and click Add just to show you, add a new step. I'm going to add an action. And I think I called it Patch Demo. And my custom connector shows up right here. And you see the actions on it. Used to access the data source to pull data, used to insert or update. So it was great. Build once, use twice.
No cliffs.
No what?
No cliffs. That's what we call no cliffs. We leverage what has been done to extend as opposed to starting over.
Exactly. So that's why you're here. I use the access. There's no parameters I need to pass. And that's where I'm getting data from. My filter array. I am trying to get the servers that are equal to what was in the server group that I passed from the variable above. And the apply to each year. The patch level does the exact same thing. I'm going to go ahead and redo this one for fun. We're going to get rid of our apply to each, and we're going to set up the Azure Automation one. We'll just do it outside here. Let's open that my plus. Okay, fine. Go and delete that. Sure, why not?
You could save it under a different name if you want to.
That's all right. I'm just trying to get it's not giving me my arrow now, unfortunately. Let's try this again. And there was my plus level. That's what I was looking for. So we're just going to add an action here. While that's happening, we're going to go ahead and delete this action.
There it is.
There goes our apply to each. We're going to come in here, type Azure Automation or Azure.
It's coming. It's just bouncing on you for right now.
Yeah, my ones are a little slow today. Create job.
That's a lot of actions there.
Yeah, I know.
That I could really use. You know, I'm thinking of each one. Wow.
My Visual Studio subscription. I think it's that one. I'll find out in a minute. My automation account. The name of my runbook, patch server. So it's nice here. If you take a look here, all of my runbooks will show up here. So when you populate your runbooks here in Azure, they will show up.
Can you briefly explain what a runbook is in case we have non-Azure users on the call?
Certainly. Let's go ahead and take a look at one real quick. Webinar. Yeah. The runbook is the piece of code that you are going to want to execute. And I'll go ahead and show. And we can create a blank one real quick. So right now, these are the runbooks that I have. And if you noticed in the flow window, it's showing the exact identical ones. It takes a little time to refresh this sometimes when you add new ones. But if I wanted to add a runbook, I could browse the gallery and find somebody that has one, or I can add a blank one. Create a new runbook or import an existing runbook. We have the different types. And cool. PowerShell, Python. I'm not very good with Python. Graphical. PowerShell workflow and graphical workflow. We're going to stick with just straight PowerShell for right now.
And basically, would you say that a runbook is like a collection of actions that you want to run at a particular condition? So it could be a series of actions or scripts.
It's a script, yeah. It's a script that you can run and set up. So anything you type in PowerShell, it can run.
Okay,
and you
perfect.
Can import commandlets. You can import a bunch of different things and assets.
Okay.
But yeah, essentially, just write PowerShell. And just get process. So I can remember what I'm doing. How you spell that? Excuse me. Go ahead and save it. And I have a test pane here just to see what it's going to do. Obviously, I'm not running this against anything. So we're going to see if this works. Good. And it should give me the processes on whatever Azure Automation server this is running. And these are the processes. Not a lot of data on that one, so probably not the greatest command to run, but if I ran it against a server, I could get the processes on different servers. And essentially, that's what it is. You put whatever kind of code in here that you want to run against a machine, pass it a machine name, you have to wire that up, because you should be able to get process. Sorry, we're flying off the cuff here, everyone.
And so that is the patch, actually. The PowerShell script is what's actually performing the patch itself.
Right.
Okay.
Or whatever code that you want to run in here.
And from Flow, what you were showing us is that you can access that runbook in order to execute that script and therefore make the patch.
Exactly.
Oh, this is much easier than I thought it would be, Brian.
So yes, if I save and publish this, that will show up in here, and I can select that. And that's how that works.
That's awesome. So just think, those of you that are working in PAS or IIS or virtualization, think of all the runbooks that you can automate using Flow. You can set up triggers, you can set up conditions, and then run those runbooks or execute or initiate those runbooks based on some condition in an app or some condition in your data source.
And unfortunately, it's having an issue with the connection today. But what would happen is it would show me the variable. So it would show me a server name box here, which I would just pick one of the activities up here, populate that, and then it would create the for each statement for me.
Yeah.
But we're having some activity problems, so I can't really get into that right now.
Okay. No problem. If we look at the one you already created, can we see those variables?
I think we're having the same issue there. It's working, working for me to set it up, but we can try. Yeah, for some reason we're having a failed to fetch the get runbook call today.
Ah, okay.
That's why we're not seeing that box here with what it was populated.
Ah, d'accord. I see what you're saying.
All
right. Well, I'll help you follow up on that if you need.
No problem. I'll look into that.
Thank you, Brian.
There could be some maintenance going on in Azure. It could be my Azure account. There's a lot of different variables.
Gotcha. So far on the chat, we've got some positive feedback, but no other questions. Can you give us, like, in doing this, like, give us a little bit of an idea of what you appreciated the most in working with PowerApps and Flow together? Like, what was your favorite piece of this that you would encourage other people to use?
Really the seamlessness. I mean, I looked into the connector for the Azure Automation to pipe it right into PowerApps, and I really struggled with the syntax. So then I moved in and went to Flow.
Yeah.
And was able to drag and drop and be able to fill out my variables really quickly when it was working. So that was a real nice piece of it. You know, more drag and drop, less figuring out the JSON code or whatever it's trying to have me pass. The other thing I really enjoyed was the scheduling and how that it was so easy to set up a wait time in my flows, which I'd never done before. I didn't have to think about it.
Yeah, and I agree on both. So the first one, basically the way we connect, the syntax isn't self-evident, and so it was a little bit of figuring out. Whereas when you use the button and launched a Flow, Flow made it easier to fill in those parameters, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good. And we have this feedback, and we're working to make it a little bit easier in PowerApps as well. But it's excellent to be able to use Flow to facilitate that kind of work whenever you want to, whenever you can. And then the second one that you brought up was the whole idea of scheduling, which I tell you, I just like apply to each. I really love scheduling because to me, it's just like having timer jobs, which back in the day, we used to have to be server admins and own the box and everything to do stuff like that. And, you know, you can create schedules on anything now. And so I do like those two features too. And if you were to help someone who's getting started with Azure Automation, where might you tell them to start? Like, to get started in learning about Azure Automation?
Channel 9 has some good videos on it. There's an Azure Friday series that I watch. I think it's really good, and they have the Azure Automation piece in there sometimes. It's a little bit of searching for that. But there it is. I mean, the first thing I would start with is making sure you write a little bit of PowerShell and get used to writing PowerShell.
Okay.
And then once you have that, it pretty much just flows right into Azure Automation. It just handles the running for you.
Okay. I have an app on my phone. It's not a Microsoft app, but if you go to any of the app stores and look for PowerShell, it has a full directory of all the PowerShell commands for various products, because I used to write a lot of PowerShell for SharePoint. And so it actually has a Microsoft group, an Amazon group, a Cisco group, a Citrix group, a Dell group, an IBM group. It's a great app for people who are learning PowerShell. I'll put the link to that app in the description. But PowerShell is really, to me, a very powerful tool to use in SharePoint Online or in Office 365 in general. I've used it for Exchange needs, for user property needs, for profile store kind of things, as well as SharePoint, building lists in SharePoint, so that you build them all the same, exactly the same, no matter where you want to build them. So there's a lot of uses for PowerShell. So between checking out the, Azure Friday series, it's at a YouTube series, Brian?
Yes.
And it is a Microsoft YouTube, on the Microsoft channel, right?
Right.
Okay, so I'll put a link to that as well in the description of the video, because this is where we really learn to grow our applications and make them most powerful for our business when we start integrating these things. And I'd really love to get to a place where we go further and we extend applications like this to include IoT, where we can perceive things through sensors and maybe respond to them through bots. I just can see the future so clearly when I see applications like this. They motivate and inspire. So, Brian, any heads up you want to tell them, like, don't do this, or please don't try this because it will get you the wrong thing? Oh, I love that. Is like a PowerShell reference right in Azure?
Yeah, I was gonna do that.
Where's
You can click the I'm in Runbooks here in Process Automation, and there's a browse gallery that people have posted. You can click on it and see the Runbooks that people have out there, and actually download them and use them and modify.
Oh,
It's searchable and a lot of the code, so it's a good place to get started on this code. How to use SQL commands in an Azure Automation Runbook is very nice. I use that quite a bit.
now do you have to be an admin of the tenant to see this?
No, you do have to have, I think, contributor rights in the Azure Automation.
Okay.
So it's to set you up, but you don't have to be an admin or co-admin to do Azure Automation Runbooks.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so back to my question. What should they never do? Like, what are some things that are bad practices?
That's a good question. I can't think of any off the top of my head right now. The only thing I could say is be very patient. Jobs will queue and run. Some pointers are definitely have outputs and inputs that you can read so you can do your error handling and troubleshooting. But never do. I don't know if there's a lot there. Things that are normal, like for flows as well. Don't kick off jobs that are just going to embed into other jobs and continually, because they'll drive your cost up and stuff like that. Or don't schedule them every 2 minutes.
Yes, good point. Number of flows, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this
you want to be efficient.
It's kind of a flow system as well. Things
yeah.
like that.
Good. And I think we mentioned earlier renaming your actions and triggers if you can, so that the formula bar in PowerApps is more explicit. And in general, your flows are easier to read. I think we called that out. You might want to, one more thing you might want to do is you, when you click on these buttons that do amazing things like patch servers, remember to include some type of data validation, and perhaps even a secondary "are you sure" pop-up may be helpful when you're talking about serious impacts. Just making sure that users can't accidentally launch something that would be detrimental if they launched it by accident. I like the way you integrated into your conversation how you prevented servers that have been patched already from being patched again. And so rewind if you didn't catch that. He did bring that out a little while ago. Those kind of steps for data validation are really important for a production app. You want to make sure that accidents don't happen, that you account for those type of possibilities. So just take the time to think them through, and then you can easily configure conditions into Flow or into PowerApps to help with those, to help mitigate those risks. So even though we are doing rapid build applications, we still want to be risk averse and build in data validation where we can. And remember that the data security is always at the data source. And so just be careful that your security is accurate at the source of the data. So only the people that can run that PowerShell script would be able to initiate that PowerShell script. So, that PowerShell script. So we'd want to make sure that PowerShell script is properly permissioned as well. So I have a question here. I might mess up his name, but Vive, I hope I pronounced that close, ask, are there any pointers related to slow response due to geographical area? Most of my customers in Africa network is primarily the main issue. So Brian, the issue here is in certain data centers, we might have issues with slowness due to bandwidth constraints and so forth. Thank you. I got his name close. Do you have any tips to actually reduce latency in general?
Yes. In regards to Azure Automation, you can pick the region that you want to deploy your Runbook server to. And you can also have a hybrid worker, which will allow you to have a server on premise that actually does the execution. So you would spin up your Azure Automation, connect to a hybrid worker that was in your Africa data center, and the code would actually run from there. And that'll help your latency. And we do that quite a bit as well. We have several hybrid workers, and they're just servers you spin up and install an agent, very much like the gateway servers you use for PowerApps to connect to on-premise. And all the execution can run from those machines that are local to your data center versus running from the cloud.
Very good. And I think that's a general best practice as well. App, data, and flows running in the same data center as the user will reduce latency. So good point and great question. Thank you. Any other questions, concerns, feedback that you'd like to share on this presentation? Again, I'm watching the chat. Otherwise, we're going to end this session. Brian, thank you so much for such an excellent group of presentations. You know, last time and this time together, this is a real production-ready application that Microsoft is enjoying today. And for you to share with us how you built it is so valuable to all the app makers out there in the world. So thank you so much. We hope to have you back again, because I know you do have another set of applications that you've shown me that I'd love to share with the rest of the world too. So let's see if we can schedule you to come back soon.
Absolutely.
You're getting thank yous and thumbs up and awesome. So and your answer to his question, he understands, and he says, I think bandwidth issue will be passed once the SA data center is up and running. So he's waiting for, I think that's South Africa, SA South Africa. Yeah. Once the data center goes up. And David, one of my other favorite MVPs out there, is got his thumbs up too. So thanks again, Brian. Unless there are any other questions, we're going to give you back your 10 minutes. Thank you so much. Feel free to rewind this. And SA was South Africa, so we're looking forward to that data center. And you guys have a great week, and thank you. I'm sure I'll feel better soon. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. All will be good. You guys take care, and I will see you soon. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.